Hi, this is Anna Imagination with the Healing Garden. Welcome. I'll get it there with the Philosopher's Garden. And welcome to this podcast is not a conspiracy. If you are new to my work, I am a philosopher, sociologist, and psychologist of 30 years. Today, we are going to talk about two things. The first thing we're going to talk about is non-consensual education, because I am really sick and tired of it. And it feels really good to really sit down and give names to things. Non-consensual education is when you're having a conversation and somebody in the room suddenly feels it is their sole obligation to educate you because they think your problem is you don't know. So the first thing they're doing is they are assuming you are stupid. The second thing they are doing is assuming that they know better than you. This is a form of perspective abuse. I had somebody who was following me for a while, and he posted something on Facebook and tagged Carl Jung's quote to it. The thing that he decided to tag on the image was quite literally two people having sex and the Star of David, and I know it's got another name to it out there, attached over that, which is just second perspective symbology. And then he took Carl Jung's quote and plugged it in. And I'm going, first of all, I was introduced to theology through Carl Jung. The entire concept of psychology of what is religion, I learned all of this from Carl Jung. He's like, I quote Jung so much, it's disgusting. So he's also the person who branched philosophy over to psychology for me. He's the one who introduced me to psychology. And then most of my work is based off of Jungian philosophy, Jungian psychology. So I know a little bit about Jung. And it's actually, Carl Jung is a few of my psychologist books that I actually kept because his shit checks out. So he delivers this information to me. Well, I make the comment like, okay, interesting perspective. He asks me for mine. And my thought immediately was, okay, I had energy from him. Like this is someone who wants to prove himself right. This is someone who wants to flout his own value. This is not somebody who wants to learn. So I've learned to read that energy and to honor it. So I did not entertain that concept. And I do not talk to people who are not interested in learning. And he responded by simply giving me a Wikipedia or Britannica link on Carl Jung as if I've never heard of Carl Jung, which I'm at a point where that's an offense. I am at a point where someone does that to me and I'm like, that's offensive. But I just blocked him and I walked away. And I thought, how often do we walk through lives a day and somebody without our consent decides to educate us? And it's really this, it's this abusive attitude of, you're going to listen to me and you're going to be educated and you're going to hear what I have to say no matter what. And that is really what it means. And because we're not mindful of this, because we're not conscious of it, many of us, and these are the emotions that come from that, is we feel like we're being forced, and we are, to listen to opinions, listen to a lecture. We are being forced to be in an audience that we did not sign up for. Right off, they are telling us that they are a superior official than we are, that they know better. And here's the thing is, no one is talking about credentials first. Like, first of all, I was a stranger to this person. So he clearly did not know my credentials. And then he just assumed that I didn't have them. And I'm so glad I did not engage in a perspective conversation with him. But it is very much a limiting, and I do this with myself. It's something I am very, very conscious about doing with myself, is when you are in a fit one-on-one conversation with someone, the only real right answer is to assume that you know less than that person. And if both people assume that they know less than the other person, you will actually have a very open-minded, explorative conversation where you both learn. That's the ideal situation. But if someone gets into a preachy, I'm going to tell you and you're going to consume this, you're being forced. It's not consensual. And it is a serious problem, because in order to have the Constitution to endure someone else's opinion or lecture, you have to first be mentally healthy. You also have to have a certain amount of self-esteem. You also have to have a certain skill set with boundaries. Now, if you do not have this combination ready to go, you are in no position to hear someone else's opinion, because it'll become internalized. Their information will tear apart your self-esteem. And if you are not mentally healthy, or you're dealing with a bad day, stress, a trauma day, you got bad news that somebody you love passed away, you are in no constitution to accept or receive somebody's stupid perspective. And it puts us in a position where suddenly we're being forced, no matter what our mental state is, to listen to every stupid little opinion that comes along. Now, a perspective is a very important thing until it's being forced into your mind. And that is something that is such a vital thing. We are talking about, do you have consent to touch my perspective? Do I have consent to touch your perspective? Let's talk about this. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You come into my YouTube channel, you are consenting to whatever I give to you. And I'm mindful of whatever I say to you can have an effect on you. That's a big fucking responsibility. Suddenly I want to be absolutely careful that whatever I put before you doesn't cause you damage. And I hope, oh good God, do I hope that if you are hearing something that does not feel good to you, you turn me off. Please take care of yourself. But YouTube is easy because you can just do that. I know some people who actually feel guilty when they don't subscribe to people. Those boundaries, you need boundaries, you need self-love if you are one of those persons. But in real life, it's a completely different story, because now you're looking at conflict. Now you're looking at, oh, well, I'm not allowed. I have to listen to what they have to say. So it's literally non-consensual or forced audience. It's non-consensual education. And at the end of the day, no matter how you want to chop it down, somebody's perspective is being forced inside your mind, whether or not you want to hear it. And there's no choice. It is not pleasant. You're not supposed to enjoy it, which is why so many of us feel uncomfortable when we are stuck in a conversation that we did not consent to, because it is damaging you. And it's absolutely boundary setting. And the way the boundary goes literally looks like this. Excuse me, I'm sorry. I understand that this might be something that's important to you, but I am not in any kind of a situation right now where I can accept you. I can accept your perspective. I cannot hear your perspective right now. I do not have, and if you really want to fluff their ego, add something like, I cannot give you the full attention that you deserve. That's an example of, if basically really complimenting them as you withdraw. You're great. I cannot give you the reception you require. And usually they're so complimented by that they really don't notice that you're withdrawing and pulling away. So that is a phenomenal way to start setting boundaries, if you're not good with setting boundaries, or if you're just worried about it. Ideally, and then there's I just don't want to hear what you have to say right now. Then there's that, depending upon relationships, your social situation. My partner literally says, Anna, please change the channel. That's our arrangement. It's like a thing we do where he says, Anna, change the channel. And I literally drop the subject and I'll talk about something else. Sometimes he flips the channel 2 or 3 times. And it's, again, it depends on your comfort level, a lot of different variations, but really understanding that allowing your perspective or having a perspective that's open, it's so out there. that some stranger comes along and they start preaching to you without your consent. They assume that you're stupider than them. I really kind of wish I had stayed in the conversation and said, am I to understand that you are assuming that I am less educated than you? That's really what I wish I had said in hindsight. But another part of me says, no, Anna, you know he's a third perspective. You know he's a third perspective trapped inside of a sixth perspective, and he clearly has a couple narcissistic tendencies with a few of the things he said to you. Like, don't touch that. So I did the right thing. I did the moral thing, and I walked away. But I don't know. And I think the reason why is because I don't like just cutting people off and assuming the worst. I really hate doing that. I really wanted, but I really saw no way I could have conversed with him where he either wouldn't have immediately grown a larger ego that was more interested in proving how right he was. He just wasn't open to listen. So I did the right thing. And it's something that I've noticed a lot about is non-consensual education. It is a big deal. And it is the core of the majority of perspective abuse that occurs today it's receiving education or being forced to be an audience to somebody who you don't want to hear. And it's infuriating. So boundary up. The other thing I want to talk about is prejudice. But these are invisible prejudices. These are prejudices that are out there and they get very little, if any, attention at all. The one that we hear about a lot is disabled prejudice. This is a prejudice that a lot of almost every person who's disabled gets this. It is a big, big prejudice that the world is absolutely, of all the invisible prejudices, it's the most visible. There's just that's exactly it. And it's still pretty invisible. And the reason why is because these are people who they have no voice in a lot of cases. They can't be heard. The thing is, if you're disabled, it almost always goes hand in hand with a mental illness, which is the other prejudice. The invisible prejudice is the stigma of mental illness. Really, people call it a stigma, which is a nice word for saying, oh, they're downright prejudiced against you. I remember I would go through several medical things, ERs. Anytime I went into anything medical, they always asked me, what's your history of your mental illness? And they would go through it. And I would watch them downright abuse me as I gave them the list. Once it was extreme to the point where I was literally held under surveillance for no reason for 24 hours. They took all of my possessions because the doctor said, well, you said you were suicidal. And I said to her, you asked me what my mental history was, and I told you I did have suicidal ideation. She absolutely was just, that's in Wonderland. So afterwards, I got to a point where I realized there was no reason to give them any kind of medical background as far as my mental health goes. So I stopped, and my God, did I see something entirely different unfold. What I saw was a red carpet treatment where when they started to realize my education level and my no mental health history, oh, did they treat me like a god. I noticed that I was receiving health care like in a fraction of the time. I noticed that they were literally bringing me the best in the hospital to speak with me. And I was like, are you fucking kidding me? That's pretty fucking dirty. And it wasn't one time, it wasn't twice, it was multiple times in a lot of different places. So I'll be the first to tell you, unless you really have to, I would not tell anyone what your mental health history is because it's irrelevant in most cases. And I would, if you have a therapist, I would ask your therapist to confirm that. But the amount of abuse from this stigma is fucking disgusting. And I don't want to call it stigma because stigma is a nice, like, let's clean up the truth about prejudice and call it something different so people won't get upset. No, and here's the other thing is 99% of the government crap that's out there to help people with disabilities and mental illness are so mentally ill and disabled that they can't use the products that they give them, the services that they give them, because you're battling social problems. You're battling mental discipline. You're battling mental demons. You can't think clearly. You have amnesia. You can't focus. Responsibility sends you into a spiraling panic attack. And it was laughable. I remember being so mentally ill early on, being incapable of making phone calls even. Answering my mail was a whole nother nightmare. And I couldn't do it. I had too much trauma associated with phone, texting, and with my mail at that time. Could not do it. And yet, that is exactly what you need to do to apply for all of these programs. And so it was like this ridiculous, stupid catch-22 that people at the top made for people down at the bottom without having any realism over what actually goes on down at the bottom. There, boom, that's the problem. So many people are up at the top making decisions for people down at the bottom, having no clue what down on the bottom actually looks like. And this is one of those things where I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? And now that I'm through it, now that my brain is put together and I'm going, okay, clean bill of health, I'm great to go. Now I can function. Now I can take advantage of these programs. Now I don't need them. But I'm looking at it going, okay, so I'm climbing my social ladder in my network and I'm getting the attention of some very influential people at the top now. And a lot of me just feels like, hi, I come from the bottom of the abyss where you dump all of your useless programs on people who can't use your useless programs because they're too sick and you have no clue what's going on at the bottom. I'm here for them and I speak for them. Like, that's where I'm at with a lot of this, where I'm nearing that top. And I finally have the attention and the right placement to talk to the people who can make the changes. And everyone around me now has no mental health history. It's very minimal, so minimal. Everyone around me, a few people were born into wealth. Most of them are billionaire philanthropists. And so I'm like talking to these people and and they've got some fantastic ideas. They're warm and they're wonderful people and they genuinely want to help. Like everyone I speak to, it's a phenomenal community. But they are clueless about what it's like having a serious mental illness. They're clueless. They just don't know. And it's like, so it's interesting. It's really interesting to see the difference. And the other invisible prejudice that we never talk about is the education gap. It's very much, and there's no other way to put it. It's the artist and the nerd. We all know it. We all know this. We all know this. We were in high school. You cannot go to America in the United States and not know this. Art kids and nerd kids are bullied and beaten up. And at the end of the day, the art kids and the nerd kids are the fucking smart ones. And the majority of the people who bully and beat up the art and the nerd kids are their parents, not the school bullies. And it's like this realization that there is this massive ignorant, uneducated people hating on the smart kids, bottom line. And we see this trope in Hollywood. We know it's out there, but it doesn't end with high school. It doesn't. My brother is 2 years older than me, and he bullies me because I'm smarter than him, which is why I no longer talk to him, because he couldn't have a conversation with me 6 months ago. He told me that I dabbled in psychology, so I knew nothing about it. Yeah, that's what he said to me. So I don't talk to him anymore. And that's exactly it. And then he absolutely had a lot of other things to say to me. But it's actually coming from our families. It's coming from our close knit. It's coming from coworkers. There is this absolute unrealized prejudice that's going on between people who conform versus the art and the nerd people. And the art and the nerd people just want to be left alone. They just want to be left alone so that they can go on with their lives. But I've noticed that a lot of the people I work with now are just like, oh, another artist or another nerd, another artist or another nerd, another scientist, another somebody else who's one more person who's educated, who is absolutely being beaten up or abused by someone they love, someone they trusted. Bottom line, fourth perspective and lower, who thinks that intelligence equals insanity. That's what intelligence equals insanity. That is the kind of logic that runs the world. That's it right there. I think I'm done. Like I don't think I have to. And that concludes shifting perspectives. Like I think that's it. Intelligence equals insanity in this crazy, stupid world. And our entire government is based off of that idea. Our government bodies, our schools run off of this idea. Our medical facilities run off of this concept. And it has created this massive prejudice against being artistic or nerdy. Then those people go on to develop mental illness, and then they get another prejudice. Now they're mentally ill artists, or they're mentally ill nerds. And at the end of the day, they are just tackling plethora after plethora of just hate because they're different. And the other invisible prejudice, this is a big one, is child abuse, is children. It's the prejudice that adults have towards children. It is a prejudice that adults have toward their children. It's teachers having that ageist, and there's really no other word for it. It is an ageist. It is somebody who believes very firmly that age is a dictator of a person's knowledge, education, expertise, anything. It's the arrogance in the hierarchy that anyone who is 20 years old or older can never learn anything from somebody who is less than 20 years old. It's that concept. A lot of baby boomers love this, where, oh, I'm 55 or 65 years old. Therefore, everyone younger than me must be stupider than me, and everybody older than me must be smarter than me. So you should respect your elders. Yes, and intelligence also means insanity to these people. Like spot on. That's exactly what they also live by. And I was working with one of my case studies this last week, and we were talking to a couple toddlers. And the toddler used the word overwhelm. We asked her about her emotion, and she said, I feel overwhelmed. And it did not. I am a firm believer that children use small languages because adults use small languages around children. And when they do use a word like overwhelm, the adults go, oh, wow, the child is smart. Like we're surprised that children are smart. And that's it right there. That's a prejudice. That is an ageist. Now, prejudice is just an extreme aversion to something you're avoiding. That's all it is. That's all it ever is. It is just the opposite, furthest response you can get from something that hurt you. So if you are living with a kind of prejudice or averting the other side where I'm not prejudiced, I'm going to be the other extreme, that's still a prejudice. I love those people. I don't hate anybody. I absolutely am completely void of all hate. That's an aversion to hate, which is actually a prejudice to hate. Yes, it is such a thing. And it actually tells me that you're afraid of something with hate because something at some point regarding hate hurt you. So what are you avoiding? The ideal is to live in that neutral zone of harmony. But harmony must have a little bit of all the sides put into it right in that space. And if you're not living in that balanced harmony where you have, the yin with the yang, you're not going to live a balanced life. And the reason why that balance and that harmony is so vital is because when you reject something like hate, you are rejecting one more emotion. Hate comes from a place. It does not come from love. It has nothing to do with love. Hate comes from fear. Hate is the last stage of fear. Hate and anger are probably the dumbest two. I can't say emotions. They're actually, I adore the emotion of anger. But I have never seen much bastardization over the concept of anger and hate as I have in our society. We believe that anger is related to fear and hate is related to love, and we have these reversed. Hate is actually the last stage of fear, and it is 100% aversion to a thing that hurt you. It is fear-based. Anger is self-defense. It leads to change, and it is when you should be communicating your boundaries, and it is tied to love. Anger is love-based. So you should be embracing your anger and then using your anger to get change, problem solve, communicate. Anger is supposed to be used as the fuel for change and the fuel for peace treaties. But what ends up happening is people think that anger is toxic. And why that happens is because people who are foundationals, when they feel anger because they're so uneducated, because they're in a lower level of evolution, what ends up happening is they take anger and they use that for violence because they haven't evolved further yet. At the stage 5 and 6 perspective, anger gets transformed over to communication and boundaries. And then at 6 plus, I believe it could be 5 plus. 5 plus, if the person is educated enough at fifth perspective, then they turn it into problem solving. But all of this requires anger. If you don't get angry, you make no change. If you don't get angry, it's because you're okay with the way everything is. That's not okay. Hate is significant fear. Fear, like it's like fear is defensive fear. Fear is defensive. Hate is aggressive fear. That's it, really. Hate is aggressive fear. Now watch this. Crime of passion. Passion is confused here. It's actually hate. It's a crime of hate. Passion is love-based. We are confusing passion for hatred. Hatred is fear-based. So now we have stupid words like crime of passion, which is just an oxymoron. It's actually a crime of hatred, which is actually that final breaking point, blackout rage, fear. Rage is part of hate, and that is part of fear. So you have your fear, which is defend, 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 and then you have this snapping point. Just like anger, there's a breaking point. Fear also has a breaking point. In anger, the breaking point of anger switches you over to problem solving, but in fear, you become like a red locust. Literally, locusts are amazing. This is an insect that's green, but if it has a certain amount of cortisol inside, I think it's cortisol, once it reaches a level of cortisol, it switches all of its brain over to an aggressive hatred, attack, survive mode, and that's when a grasshopper becomes a locust. I think. Oh, see, now I doubt myself and I have to check my sources. Are grasshoppers locusts? Cannot say something without knowing. Da 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 da. La da 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 da. The difference between grasshoppers and locusts. Just give me 2 seconds here. Locusts are all over the news. Are they grasshoppers? Grasshoppers are insects and primarily blah blah blah. Physical characteristics. Grasshoppers have 2 pairs of wings. Most grasshoppers. Okay, so what about going on about locusts? Locusts are grasshoppers. There you go. Locusts are grasshoppers that develop gregarious characteristics. Okay, so yes, I am quoting the Discovery Channel properly. Okay, so basically, there's a cortisol, a hormone inside the grasshopper. And when that gets triggered, it snaps inside their brain. Basically, the amygdala, I believe it is, releases the cortisol. The cortisol goes through the grasshopper's brain, turns the locust over to a grasshopper over to a locust. The locust will literally turn red at this point. It completely changes their body color from their chameleon, their camouflage, over to red. And that's when they start devouring fields. And usually it's done when they're scared. And it's also mob mentality in insects. And that's all it is. It's fear and hate and rage. And it's also mob mentality inside a grasshopper community. So when that cortisol level reaches it, and it's like a combination of drought has to be a problem. There has to be a certain level of lack of rain. And so there's like a lot of variations that basically tell the grasshopper, you have limited resources coming this winter. And it immediately trips it over to survival mode. The reason why I'm getting into the brain of a grasshopper locust is because it is so similar to a human brain. It's amazingly similar. It's crazy similar. And we do the same thing with hate and rage, which is where crime of passion, crime of hatred comes from, is once that cortisol level hits a certain point, you snap. That's when you see blind rage. That's when you black out and people kill people. And that's where, oh, it's a crime of passion. No, it's not. It's blackout from a surplus of cortisol to the point where the fear system trips over into the hate system. So it's like this Hulk version of fear. And if you are experiencing hatred, you need to soothe. You need to comfort. It is a significant deficit of self-care, self-nurturing first perspective. Absolutely magnificent deficiency. Now, if someone truly never feels hate, well, in order to feel hate, you have to first feel fear, substantial fear. And then after that, you have to feel substantial all the other emotions. And you have to have a defense system that's down. So if you have a defense system that's down, now that opens you up to fear. And once you have fear in place, that fear can stay there, and it's various ranges. So if you find a way to cope, addiction is very, like, again, at first perspective, you lack that first perspective. So most likely you're going to have problems with addiction. You're going to have problems with eating disorder and self-mutilation. Now, those are siphons that actually allow you to not manage, control your fear by siphoning out all of your, I feel scared, I feel like I don't control because I have fear. Let's go over to this and I'll put my control into this object, item, substance, and that way I'll feel more in control. And then your subconscious mind goes, oh, look at that. That reserved a lot of energy. Let's do that from now on. So the subconscious mind will almost immediately rewire the nervous system, and the subconscious mind, so that it will the nervous system, so that it will immediately go for the addiction on the next run rather than solving the problem. Because in order to problem solve, you need to have the ability to self-soothe, first perspective, and you have to have the ability to use your boundaries to defend yourself and then problem solve your way out of the situation. But you have to get angry in order to pull that off. So it's literally understanding how fear and anger work with each other, understanding where hatred is on this scale. And when you go through trauma healing and you're working your way through fear, and then you finally get to that anger point, it's common to have anger and fear. But understand that if you are not managing it, and it's okay if you're not at this stage because, hey, this is shadow work, it's ugly. You get to that point with the fear system where you might trip over to hatred and anger. So you might have hate and anger at the same time. Now, for me, the only person I ever hated was, well, anyone who hurt my children. Their two fathers. Those were my big deals. That was, now I hate those people because I associated significant levels of fear of what they were doing to my children. It's the only time I reserved the words hate for them. And then once I got my children away from them and I was able to safely protect my children, my hate dropped down to fear. My fear, it's wonderful once you're aware of it because you can feel the chemicals changing in your brain. You can feel yourself going through the emotional pathways. It's hatred, and then the hatred dies down, and then you're in fear. The fear dies down. Now, while you have this, you have your cognitive dissonance over there with logic, and that starts to come down. So you've got these two levels that are just passing back through until you finally get back to comfort and safe zone. So if you know the emotional pathway, you can literally use the pathway and your current emotions to determine where along this pathway you are in your healing progression. If you're feeling absolutely nothing, that means that you have dissociated, you've shut down, and you have what I like to call emotional frostbite. Feel your emotions because that's dangerous if you don't. Emotional frostbite is where suicide happens. Emotional frostbite is where people fall into depression and they stay there for a very long time. You feel nothing. Once you feel your emotions, once you thaw out, changes the game, completely changes the game. Thawing out your emotions with emotional frostbite allows you basically it's like you're born again. It's like you're birthed. And the first day is the hardest because that's when you feel all the emotions, and it is excruciatingly painful for some. But get through it. Get through it. Once you get through that pain, and you're going to need the first perspective to do that. Once you get through that pain, it is significantly easier. You're always going to have the ebb and flow of the ocean emotions. They're supposed to ebb and flow. But the severity gets less and less over time, and it's a lot easier to manage. Emotional frostbite I'm still working on that one. Excuse me. So I think those are my invisible prejudice that I've been like, I think a lot of my work is going to be speaking against these invisible prejudices, the ones for children, where that's that ageist, that expectation that it's the assumption that children are stupider than adults. The assumption that children are less skilled than adults. This whole comparison between a child versus an adult is a significant part of our cultural problem. Huge. And what it does is basically you have an insecure adult. This is something I love talking about. This is easily one of my favorite subjects. You have an insecure adult who then has a child. And that child becomes the adult's emotional prosthetic. So what ends up happening is the child becomes the adult's soul defining ego. So everything the child does or does not do then is determined on how secure the adult feels, depending upon which mental illness the adult has. So now whatever emotional need the adult has, the adult will abuse the child into a certain submission. If you change let's change the way we think about abuse for a minute, because this is exactly the point. So let's say you have yourself. Here's you. This is basically your safe zone. You've got this space where you can go. And then you've got this red kind of like operation game happening. So as long as you don't touch the sides, you're fine. So you're born. You basically go through kind of like operation. You're going through and then you bump the side. And that's when you get from the nose in the game. So then you go this way, you avert, you jump. We all jump. Every time that stupid buzzer goes off, we all jump. And then we hit the other middle side and then it buzzes again and we jump back. That is because our immediate fight flight mode is jump back. So when you averse, prejudice, ready, is just a broken fight or flight system. That's all it is. Prejudice is a broken fight or flight symptom. It's all it is. As soon as you hit that one aversion, that one thing that abuses you, you jump back to get out of the way, like a hot stove going, ow, that hurt. It's exactly like that. It's a mental, you just touched the hot stove. So you jump back, fight or flight, as a means to avoid the pang, but we get stuck. Mentally, we get stuck. We jump back to avoid the pang, and then we get stuck over here, and now you've got prejudice. And it hurts so much that we don't try again, like we should be doing in the game of life. Instead, we get burned once, well, many times, because many of us are abused many times, but we get to a point where we learn that our safe zone has to be severe aversion. And that's because you've got unpredictable parents sitting here playing this ridiculous game where they're constantly pushing you on every single time you move. And you get to a point where, all right, the only safe place now is my back up against the wall. That way I can see everybody going around me. I'm going to overthink and strategically figure out the best way to get through this stupid operation game of life. And my back is to the wall because I trust no one. You gain almost like this peripheral vision in this thing. So you see the entire world like this, and you are just back against the wall. Because every goddamn time you make a move, your parents abuse you and it goes off. Or your spouse now later abuses you and it goes off. So you've learned that the only comfort zone, the only safe place is back against the wall avoidant. And there's no off switch. That's the problem. So now you're living back against the wall. Abusers are out of your life and you're still living back against a wall. And the thing is, when you live back against a wall, you attract people who want to keep you back against the wall. And that's the cycle that we see over and again in life, where we get one abuser and then another abuser comes along and they have almost the exact same type of abusing. And it's because when your back is against the wall, you're going to send out messages, a lot of messages to abusers to say, this is what I've been groomed for, please come to me. And you're not going to know this. This is all subconscious mind. This is how the subconscious mind works with each other. This is something that I thought about today that I absolutely loved, is we talk words to words, ego to ego. That's what this is. Ego to ego. That is when we have a dialogue or a conversation and you listen and I speak, or I would love for you to speak so I could listen. That would be awesome. That's an ego conversation. But our fear systems can also communicate. And this is what happens when you have a fight breakdown between two partners, is their fear systems take over and start talking. So husband has fear system, fear system, fear system. Wife has fear system, fear system, fear system. And both fear systems are puppeting the ego. It's weird because in my brain, I see Jerry from not Monty Python. That's different. I see Jerry from Rick and Morty standing over a marionette stage, dictating a little ego version of Jerry, while another Jerry dictates another ego version of Beth. And it's the puppets that represent the ego. All fear systems are Jerry in my book. So that's why there's two Jerrys puppeting both marionettes. So you've got the marionettes, and those are the egos. That's us. We're all being puppeted by the workings of our subconscious mind. I would love to get with an artist and actually have this drawn out. This would be so amazing. And then have the two Jerrys puppeting fear systems. And then Rick would be the subconscious mind standing between Jerry with a notebook. Yep, that's right. That's right. This is what's logical. I want everything in order. So Rick is dictating to the fear system exactly what logic needs to take place for the fear system to function. Now, in the back behind Rick, I can see identity bound and gagged. I see the defense system is knocked out unconscious cold, and their sword is like laid out across the floor, and the defense system is not getting up at all. And intuition is dancing mindlessly in the corner, having a great time. Gotta love intuition. Blindly just waiting for someone to say, I want something. And she's waiting to fill orders. So she's just dancing off in the corner, oblivious to everything. So this is how I see the subconscious mind working. This is it right here. Is the two fear systems are literally marionette puppets. Rick is in the back managing all of this, and the ego is sitting there as a puppet down below. But what really needs to happen is that puppet needs to be the actual manager running the whole show. What you don't know is the puppet is actually the stage manager and the executive producer of the theatrical production. So at some point, Rick, and I see him doing this, he basically hijacked the executive producer and the stage manager. They're the same one in my dream. And he turned them, used his science to turn them both into a marionette puppet that now the fear system is just dangling about. And that's how we all run lives. This is how we live. This is 100% how our brains work. And because we're not aware of this whole theatrical production going on by our six-part mental system, we're just being dragged along for the ride. We're being puppeted. The statistic came out from the CDC and NIM that, yeah, that's right. 5% was the statistic. 95% of our lives are dictated by the subconscious mind. Now, that is if you are not aware of this. This is your average fourth perspective monkey. You can change this statistic with awareness and mindfulness. So according to CDC and NIM, 95% of a person's life is dictated by the subconscious mind. And this is what the subconscious mind does. This is exactly what it does. It's literally designed to just keep you safe, keep you alive, if you're not armed up with your defense system. So getting all of this together, putting the stage together, making sure that, the fear system is soothed, making sure that you nurture it properly with growth and problem solving and logic, and making sure your defense system is up, your communication system is up, knowing the emotional pathways. That way you can manage and divert your life and make sure that, hey, I'm having an emotion, let them ebb and flow. Let them follow the emotional pathway so you know exactly what you need to do to walk yourself through the emotional stages of healing. These are a thing. The emotional stages of healing. I don't even know if they're out on the internet. They're in my head. The emotional stages of healing. Because there is literally a very predictable formula of an emotional formula of this is how you're supposed to heal. These are the emotional stages of healing. And if you don't go through the emotional pathways, there's 3, by the way. There's like 3, only 3. There's just 3. There's not a lot. There's just 3. So it's the emotional pathway if you're afraid, the emotional pathway if you're anger, and the emotional pathway if you're sad. That's it. That's all you get. There's just 3. So once you know the emotional pathways and you feel your emotions come up, you just go, oh, I know what to do. I'm feeling afraid. Okay, I need to go boom, 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 and you just follow it and it's done. And what it does is it drastically shortens recovery time. Oh my God, does it drastically reduce recovery time? Same thing with anger and same thing with sad. If you know what to do, you will immediately know what logical fallacies to look for. The best part is you will know, this is my favorite part, you will know exactly what red flags to look for in the process. So you can feel yourself sliding over to depression. Oh, I need to turn that down because that's an unacceptance of the change that's coming. I need to be open to the change. I'm not ready for the change. Okay, then I need to switch modes over to this emotional path. That way it preserves me until I'm ready. That's nice. And then you switch back over when you're ready to process it. So there's a way, once you know the different emotional pathways, you can combine them so you can safely process what you need to and buy yourself the time to adapt. Oh my God, it's beautiful. The emotional pathways are amazing. So yeah, that's it. That's your subconscious mind 101. My Jerry marionettes, the works. And yeah, I think that's it. It's just it's again that prejudice, and make sure you preserve your perspective by not allowing people, I'm reading my notes here, to force you to be an audience that they don't want, that you don't want to be to. This is something that I love to use as an example is imagine every asshole in the world has a theatrical production on Broadway. Every friggin' asshole. Every person who you have had to endure in life listening to their stupid lecture or their abuse. Imagine that that person has an entire production on Broadway for 2 hours. Would you buy a ticket to it? If you wouldn't buy a ticket to it, to sit in their audience, then why would you listen to their audience for free? And that's it right there. Whenever somebody opens their mouth, don't worry about who they are. Don't worry about how old they are. Don't you dare think about how nice it should be if you say nothing and listen. Don't you dare think about how nice it is. Nice is bad. Nice is toxic. Instead, think about, if this person was selling this show on Broadway, would I buy a ticket? And if you would not buy a ticket, you should not be listening to their show. I mean, unless you really have nothing else to do and you're okay and comfortable with that. But are you doing it at the expense of your mental health? That's the other thing, because that's what's on the line. Your precious, beautiful perspective. That is a big deal, because your perspective is not just your opinion. Your perspective is your identity. Your perspective is your personal truth. Your perspective is your logic line, which means if any illogic or contradiction goes into your perspective, it will tamper with your logic line and create an illogical fallacy. How protective are you of your perspective? Because it's not just your opinion, it is your entire reality. That is what it really is. Your perspective is how you gauge on a metric what is real and what is not. And it is 100% determined, aligned and balanced and tuned into what you love, what you value, and what you believe. So you've got this gorgeous, perfected, beautiful line all built up inside of your head with millions of data points from the time you were born to this present moment. Anyone who opens their mouth to you to talk to you is invading your perspective unless you know how to use a boundary to shield yourself so that your perspective is not being altered by their garbage. Now, it might be good garbage, but it's very, very important that you devalue everything they say with, this is just their perspective. It's just their perspective. And here's the delusion. Here's the problem. It is always just their perspective. But when they talk, they make it sound like it's fact. They make it sound like it's true. They make it sound like they're right. They make you feel like you're stupid. They make you feel like you're dumb. They make you feel like you're wrong. But it's just their perspective. And we lose that perspective every time we engage with anybody. The only time we gain and build up our perspective back is alone time. How many of us love being alone? How many of us fight being alone? And now the thing that is required, alone time, to cleanse and purify our perspective and regain our sense of self and reality, we are avoiding because we have trauma associated with being alone. So now Our perspective is permanently, constantly being exposed to, and we're not doing anything to step back, to go back to alone time, to reset, recharge, recalibrate our opinion. It is a big deal. It is not just your opinion. By the way, calling somebody just your opinion, hearing the words "that's just your opinion" is actually gaslighting. No, it's not just your opinion. It is your identity, your truth, your logic. Your sanity depends on it. Your sanity depends on your perspective. That's what they're tampering with, is your sanity. That person today who sent me that obnoxiously stupid article on Carl Jung was actually tampering with my sanity. And he was so stupid and ignorant, he did not even know that, because he's an idiot. So it's really understanding. And mind you, these are the same people who literally view intelligence as insanity. So when your sanity is on the line, when your ability to stabilize your mental health is on the line, seriously take that into account whenever you give your time to listen to somebody. And be very mindful if you are being forced to take audience against your will. It is a significantly dangerous type of abuse. And it's gaslighting. It's the type that leads us, by the way, all of this is gaslighting. All of this. This is gaslighting 101. Like all of this. And this is why gaslighting is so dangerous, is because it's actually an invasion of your sanity, of your line to reality, of your comprehension of how the life works. It's literally more valuable than your heart or your brain. You can live without half your brain. It's called a hemispectomy. Google it. It's really cool. You can live without half your brain. What you can't live without is a solid, stable, whole, logical perspective. You cannot live with half a perspective. You can't do it. You can get a heart transplant. Your perspective is it. So yeah, in so many ways, the perspective is far more valuable than any body organ that you have. For God's sakes, look at Stephen Hawking's. That man's body was a mess, riddled with disease. Well, he was sick. We all know that. But his perspective was intact. And that made the difference between the amount of weight he carried, regardless of the disability. That is the power of perspective. Protect yours. Thank you so much for joining me. And if you are interested in learning more about me, click on the link below. May the kindest of words always find you.